Hello, I'm Heidi Perryman, and I'm going to talk with you about the story of the Martinez Beavers, which kind of became a larger-than-life story, even though it didn't start out that way. Martinez is all the way across the country in about 41 miles northeast of San Francisco. So if you go under the Golden Gate Bridge and you go across the bay and all the way up in the corner to the Carquinez Strait, the creek that flows into the strait, one of many, is Alhambra Creek, which is right through my town. Goes right across Main Street, and that's where the Beavers lived. They moved in 2007. They came into that creek, which is actually both tidal and fresh, and they built a dam and a lodge. Now, Martinez is a very historic town. It's the hometown of John Muir, where he lived the last 25 years of his life. It's also the town of the first flagship shell refinery, built in 1914. So we're not uncomplicated. We wanted more than one thing. And when the Beavers came, the city was worried about that dam. They were worried that it might elevate the risk of flooding in a city that was already prone to flooding historically, especially in high tides. We can get flooding in Alhambra Creek, and they were worried the Beaver Dam was going to make that worse. But as you can see, these happen to be fairly easy to see beavers. So all the children on the way to school, all the lawyers on the way to the courtroom, all the businessmen looking for a place to park, all the people out in the evenings coming for a drink. People could all see these beavers, and they got really engaged with them. It wasn't uncommon in those days to see families with children lined up at the bridges waiting to watch the beavers. In fact, you could go to Starbucks in the morning, get your morning latte, you'd stroll out onto the patio, and you could actually watch them play. You could even hear them, and it was this sound more than anything else that got me involved. Beavers make kind of a low whining when they're young, and I thought, God, do the people that want these beavers dead even know about that sound? And if I don't do something to stop it, will I ever hear that sound again? So I thought maybe I'll work on this for a weekend. Maybe I'll give it a whole week. How long could this possibly take? Of course, that was 13 years ago. So we were glad that story was picked up by all the local papers and the state papers, and at one time even on national news. And I thought I'd play that clip for you so you know I'm not making it up.
Residents of one Northern California community are hoping a potentially costly problem will just go away, literally. A clan of industrious rodents has moved into town and is doing some serious damage to the infrastructure. But as correspondent Claudia Cowan reports, townsfolk are divided over what to do about it.
In Martinez, California, northeast of San Francisco, a family of beavers has taken up residence downtown and is busily destroying the city's multi-million-dollar flood control systems. And when the damage was first discovered, the city proposed killing the beavers and destroying their lodges. But city leaders hadn't counted on a growing pro-beaver faction. Local animal lovers, teachers, and businesses citing educational opportunities and a spike in tourism.
Beavers can teach a great deal of information about habitat and ecosystem and really how families can take care of each other.
Oblivious to both their brush with death and minor celebrity status, the beavers nonetheless present a gnawing problem.
So there was going to be a big meeting to discuss the fate of these beavers. About 200 people showed up for that meeting. They came from uptown, downtown, and out of town, and they said pretty much with one voice, we do not want you to kill these beavers, find another way. It was an amazing meeting. Everyone was there. The Sierra Club was there. The Humane Society was there. The superintendent of all the schools said he would pay to have high school students plant trees and do a study of the beavers. I sometimes describe that meeting as a combination of the last 5 minutes of It's a Wonderful Life mixed with Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. It was that good. Now, faced with massive public outcry, the city did what cities often do and appoint a subcommittee to study the issue further. Also at that big meeting, there was a documentary filmmaker, Don Bernier, and I thought I would let him show you how the story unfolded.
We first saw evidence of beaver when we noticed a fallen tree in Alhambra Creek, and then all of a sudden a dam was being constructed. We contacted the Fish and Game Department and they said, well, basically you've got two choices. One choice is to do nothing, let nature take its course, and more than likely flood in our downtown. Or two, you can take the dam out and euthanize the beavers. I learned a long time ago in politics, there's two things you don't mess around with: children's programs and seniors programs. And now I've added a third to that list, and that third is animals, and little furry ones, you know, at that.
We're building what's generally called a flow device, and it's the purpose of a flow device in a beaver dam is to control the vertical growth of the dam. Go slow, guys. We're basically sneaking water away from them. The beavers are in the process of recovering from the fur trade. So places like this are ancient beaver habitat that the beavers, after several hundred years, because of their extirpation during the fur trade, are finally returning to. But it immediately becomes very controversial because of the fears associated with flooding.
People are very anxious about the first storm. But I went back and looked at the flood data, and anytime we have more than half an inch of rain over a 24-hour period, you will have a dam washout. So the dam's not going to be an issue, it's going to be gone.
This makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. I think in other communities, you would have seen the beavers removed very, very quickly. But here in Martinez, beavers did what they did, and now the beavers have been elevated to celebrity status.
So he was right. The beavers were celebrities in Martinez. It allowed us to hire this gentleman who you guys have all met this weekend. This is Skip Lyle. He is the inventor of the Beaver Deceiver. He came out and installed a flow device at our dam and basically allowed the water to keep moving. Since this was installed in the very first days of 2008, nobody has worried about flooding in Martinez. This entirely solved our problem for a decade, even though maybe no one thought it would work, but it did. And we were able to allow those beavers to stay. And it was great because you could have an opportunity to see things like this right in your hometown. This is 8 blocks from my front door. And the beavers recovered some of their territory by building a series of secondary dams, which weren't a problem for the city because they weren't in high places and nobody was worried about flooding. Because of these secondary dams, we were able to have all this new wildlife, birds and fish and otters. And it was great because you go down to the creek one morning and you never know from one day to the next what you're going to see. Our beavers built a bank lodge, which is actually more common in streams than an island lodge. And I'm going to show you footage of Mom Beaver working on that lodge. And she does that by carrying walking on her hind feet and carrying mud and sticks above her paws and under her chin. And she'll do this over and over again till it has the level of insulation she thinks her family needs. Now, I call this mom beaver. How the heck would I know? Because beavers are monomorphs. They have no external sex characteristics except for when the female is breastfeeding, and then she has visible teats. So when mom had visible teats, we were able to notice that just by chance she happened to have a distinctive marking in her tail. And that was important because it allowed the community to follow the story. We knew who everyone was, mom, dad, the kits, the yearlings. We could see the story unfold. And our beavers were very good sports. They built their dams all near bridges so people could still watch them work. They were pretty tolerant of people at a different elevation than them. The creek is down lower than the bridges. And, they had train whistles and garbage trucks to put up with. And they did a pretty good job. Our beavers ate cottonwood. They ate willow. They ate cattails. They ate blackberries. They ate a lot of scrub plant. The trees that we wanted to protect, we could wrap with wire. And we could also see the trees coppice when the beavers chewed them. What we also could do was paint some trees with sand, and generally we found this had to be repeated every 2 or 3 years in order to be effective. The first year the beavers were there, we wanted to plant trees, and we approached the city about planting trees to make up for the ones the beavers take, and the city was not happy with that. They said we needed to get a senior biologist to assess the trees that the beavers had taken, probably because they figured that if we planted trees, the beavers would stay, and they just wanted them to leave. So we called all the environmental firms. Nobody would help us for free. But finally, one agency called us back and said, look, I have a daughter. The director said, look, I have a daughter. She's 4 years old. She made a tail at one of the beaver events you did. And ever since then, she loves the beavers. We have to every Saturday put on her tail and go down to the beaver dam and let her watch them. So, okay, I'll help you. I'll have our chief biologist help you starting Monday. Is that soon enough? So involving the community became important in ways that we couldn't even foretell. And I think now we work with the Watershed Stewards of AmeriCorp, and they help us plant trees from willow cuttings. That's really effective as well. And it has taken a long time to get as much respect as we need to do that, but we're happy about it. In the meantime, the beavers have shown us a lot of their lives. Here are 2 kits engaged in mutual grooming, which you can see feels fantastic. Here I'm going to show you some footage of Dad Beaver carrying 2 babies on their back, trying to teach them how to swim. And here's footage of Mom Beaver swimming up to check on 2 slightly older kits to see how they're doing. There she is. Now, the first time we had both kits and yearlings, we wondered how they'd get along. Would there be competition or sibling rivalry? But it turns out yearlings are like really fun uncles. They give you rides on their back, they bring you treats, and they really do a lot of care to earn their keep in the family. During the 10 years we had Beavers in Martinez, they had 27 kits. And you might be thinking, oh my gosh, 27, what do they do with all those beavers? But remember, when beavers get to be 2 years old, they go off to seek their own fortune. So out of those 27 kits, we never had more than 7 beavers in Alhambra Creek. And we like to think we've changed the beaver population and IQ of beavers all across the Bay Area. No one really knew whether beavers would have an impact on a urban setting, but we were going to find out. And what we saw was that the dam was trapping sediment and organic material, and as we all know, that gets broken down by tiny microbes we can't see, which get eaten by bigger bugs. But these bigger bugs get eaten by better bugs, and the things that eat those bugs do better at a beaver pond. It's also important to remember that beavers are constantly moving and removing mud. So they're scraping it off the pond floor and they're dumping it on the dam or the lodge. And what this means over time is that we end up with a pond floor that's kind of pockmarked like the surface of the moon. So different elevations appeal to different insects, and we end up with an invertebrate bloom at a beaver pond. And that means that everything that eats those bugs and everything that eats the things that eats those bugs does better at a beaver pond. So we've seen more dragonflies, more crayfish, more birds coming to eat the dragonflies and crayfish. It's been a really wonderful thing, and we've been able to trap some great moments with some really wonderful amateur photographers. We never used to have kingfisher at the beaver pond, and now we see them all the time, and they're in residence. We actually never used to have green heron in Alhambra Creek. Now we see them all the time, and they're breeding in residence. It's great because you never know what you're going to see one day to the next. And it's lovely because even if you don't see the beavers, you might see something. And that really made everybody much more attentive to the creek. We were able to get pictures like this and send it off to an expert at UC Davis, and he would identify those fish and send it back to us. This is actually a Sacramento splittail, which hadn't been identified in Alhambra Creek before and is a species of special concern in California. I like this picture especially because you can see that when the beaver's pushing up to work on the dam, he actually gets a fish on his eye because the water is so thick with fish. And this has got to be something that happens all the time to beavers. Our pond turtle population went way up. Our frog population went way up. We saw more mallards and better clutches because of the ponds the beavers produced. And it was great because if kids come down to see the beavers one day, maybe they don't see the beavers, but they see the baby ducks, or maybe they see the muskrat. Our muskrat population also really went up when the beavers came. And it was wonderful to be able to see all these new species emerge from this tired old urban creek. Now, we were surprised to see this guy showed up one winter in his play clothes, and he liked it so much he came back with his friends, and they all came back in their fancy clothes. So this is a hooded merganser. They're a voracious fish eater. They're definitely not there for the view, and we get these ducks every winter 3 blocks from Main Street because of the changes the beavers made. One of the things we noticed is that small river otters like to use the pipe of Skip's flow device like a kind of tunnel or water slide. So they go inside the pipe and they'll go boom, 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 boom. We can hear them going up over the dam, and they come out and they'll fish inside that cage or filter. And the reason they do that, see his little head there? The reason they do that is because a fish can get in through the bars, but the beavers can't. So beavers and otters, always neighbors, but not always friends. We were especially surprised when we saw this face. This is a mink. Mink hadn't been seen in Alhambra Creek for 50 years. And this guy came in with his mother and siblings. And at that time, we were noticing, my goodness, we're not seeing very many muskrats. I wonder why that is. Well, it turns out one of Mink's favorite food is muskrat. So the mink is there for the muskrat's there for the habitat, and it's all there because of the beavers. Beavers are the trickle-down economy that works, even in an urban setting. Now, a couple years ago, back in BBC Earth, Alex Riley said, the beaver isn't just an animal, it's an ecosystem. And we thought that was such a great phrase. We worked with a local artist to put together a poster to kind of show it off. I wanted beavers to be seen everywhere, but people all agreed or thought that beavers were not in urban areas, and it was so unusual for them to be in Martinez. That's not true. In 2015, we did a survey, and in some 38 states, beavers showed up in urban areas. That's why we wanted to put together the handout that you have in your packet, because if beavers aren't in a city near you soon, they're coming. And it's better to be prepared for them. Now, we were very happy when this woman approached us. This is Susie Esterhaus. She's a very well-known wildlife photographer, been on the cover of Time. And she wanted to cover the Martinez Beaver story for Ranger Rick. And when the kids were born, and we got to hang out with her and hear stories about photographing wildlife in Kenya or Africa, and really have some great photographs that we could use down the road. It was a lot of fun, and our issue is in May 2017. And I wanted to be able to show kids all across the country that living with urban beavers is possible. And so that's why we were especially happy when Ben's book was published a year later. Ben actually launched his book at the Beaver Festival, which brings us to a very good discussion of the Beaver Festival and how it started way back in 2008 when the city was deciding what to do. They never actually took an official vote on the fate of the beavers. They suspended their campaign to kill them, but that's all. And we thought the beavers would be safer after we threw a party for them. So we held the first Beaver Festival in 2008, and we've held one ever since then. It was so much fun. First one was tiny affair with only 10 booths and 300 people. Now we have about 50 wildlife booths. It's one of the largest wildlife events in Northern California. And really, we try to teach people about living with beaver in an urban setting, but also how to pay attention to wildlife. We have beaver tours, we have live music, we have children's activities, education, and it's a really fun day for families and children and adults and all kinds of people who are interested in nature in their own backyard. Our Beaver Festival now is in June. It's in a nice park. And what we really found is that involving the community has made a huge difference. Right now we're working with a local chalk artist, and she is from Napa, and what she does is do a giant mural in the middle of the park of beavers and the wildlife they create. We have a parade at the festival as well. So Amy is really talented, and she has been really dynamic, and thank God she's a yoga instructor, so she's able to sit on the hard concrete for days and days and do these fantastic murals with us. What we find is that engaging the community is actually really important in kind of putting the pressure on the city council that allows them to think past the simplest solutions and think in a more long-term way about what effect not only it has on the biodiversity, but also on the community. You know, urban wildlife is really understood to have a dynamic impact on social cohesion, and that's been really true. This year, we're going to do the mystery at the Beaver Pond, so kids are going to be trying to identify the suspects that might be responsible for the case of the missing salmon, and that's going to be a lot of fun. That's at the end of June. So again, what I can say is that beavers make a real difference in your creek, but they also make a real difference in your community in allowing people to see how to engage wildlife, and the difference is that taking care of your creek, letting wildlife take care of your creek can have in an urban setting. Well, we've certainly seen it make a difference for us. Now, way back when we started learning about the beavers, there were really only 3 websites on the entire internet. It's hard to even imagine now. But back in 2007, there were only 3 websites that talked about coexisting with beaver, and we wanted to make sure that changed. We wanted the tools to be really available, and we started the martinezbeavers.org website for that. And now I think it's probably one of the biggest websites that documents every day beaver issues, and sort of the news allows me to know what's going on and allows people to connect. Our local beavers attracted some fantastic photography. The nighttime photography was all taken by Moses Silva that you saw here today. The stills by Cheryl Reynolds, who's vice president of Worth the Dam, and Rusty Cohn. And the daytime video was taken by myself. None of us came to this thinking we were going to photograph beavers. It just happened. I'm going to show you some footage Moses took recently of some visitor beavers. But this will be an explanation for you why having a photographer, even an amateur, is really better than having a night cam. Look at that little face. So Moses wasn't a photographer. He's a pipe fitter. He got interested in the beavers just because of the dams and how curious they were. And he's kind of a wild spirit enough that will sneak down in the middle of the night to film these really amazing images that we've been so grateful for. So I'm really happy to be able to share kind of the effect that beavers had in Martinez. I certainly never thought this would come out this way, and I certainly never thought my own life would be as changed by beavers as they have been. But Martinez has really learned that beavers make a difference. When you help them, they help you. I definitely think they've been worth a damn, and when beavers come to your city or your town, they're going to be worth a damn too. Thank you very much.